This is 9/11 Freefall.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to another episode of 9/11 Freefall. I'm the host, Andy Steele. Dale Pierce is back again tonight as my guest. He's going to be telling us about a talk that he's going to be giving in Portland, Oregon, coming up very shortly. This event also, Richard Gage is going to be presenting the evidence for controlled demolition of the three towers that fell in New York on 9/11. So this is going to be one that you want to see if you can make it. There, you'll be hearing a little bit more about it, giving a little bit of a preview. Dale will also be talking in this interview tonight about some of the great work that he's doing locally, reaching out to prominent people in his home area with the 9/11 controlled demolition evidence and other issues. And we'll be talking a little bit about the epidemic of soldier suicide, soldiers coming back from the post-9/11 wars and taking their own lives. It really drives home why our mission here at 9/11 Freefall is so important. So before I play that interview, we'll do what we do every week. We'll take 10 seconds of silence to remember the victims of 9/11, their families, and all the people who died in the wars that followed 9/11. We're going to do that beginning now. And that's 10 seconds.
The views expressed on this show by guests and the host on issues outside of the 9/11 controlled demolition evidence are the opinions of those individuals alone and do not necessarily reflect those of architects and engineers for 9/11 Truth.
Dale Pierce is a volunteer with AE 9/11 Truth. He leads many of the Firefighter Outreach efforts, and he does a lot of personal outreach within his local community, which is getting bigger and bigger, the scope of his reaching out about over 9/11 and other issues. So, Dale, welcome back to 9/11 Freefall.
Andy, it's a pleasure to be here and share with everybody that helps us out.
Now, it's been a few months since you were on the show. Last time we were there to talk about the outreach to the city council. What have you been doing since then?
You won't believe it, but last night I had a personal meeting with the vice mayor of the city I live in. It's a city of over 110,000 people. And I have volunteered for a coalition that works with city council and the police department on the sales of alcohol, tobacco, and marijuana in our city. So I am in a position now where I'll be meeting each and every city council member on a one-on-one basis. We present these issues to city council and suggestions. We make recommendations. And lo and behold, this organization, their code of conduct and their values states that we are the voice for those without a voice. Well, I told them about the fact that firefighters are no longer able to talk about operations, and the fact that Building 7 came down in 6.5 seconds, and they're still required to go in there and fight fires. And you could just see silence throughout the room, like, where did this guy come from? And one of the doctors stood up and goes, oh my God, this makes perfect sense. If you've got firefighters assembling in a building that can fall down, just dealing with the fact that we got to go in there and fight the fires, and everything else is bringing up anxiety. You might have been on vacation or whatever and just not up to par. So this is a whole new thing, that the building can come falling down and so on else, because these people, they work with city council, they know how to pass resolutions and such, stated that the mayor is liable. If a firefighter even has so much as a heart attack, we don't need a building falling down, just a heart attack brought on by the anxiety of assembling in this building that we really don't know how it fell down. There's so many explanations. Then the city council can be liable. So, as you know, when you and me went before city council, it's like taking off on a big wave as a surfer. You get up there at the podium and it's too late. You're committed. And you saw the look on the city council's face when we dropped the bombshells. And we did not have video of Building 7. Our descriptions were good enough. Wait until we come back a little more organized and with the video.
That's right, and folks, you can do that yourself. We talked about it last time Dale was on the program. Outreach to City Council, that's one of the volunteer activities that we offer to people who fill out that volunteer form. It's for maybe the more extroverted than the introverted, but I tell you what, once you get used to doing it, it is so not a big deal, especially since the speech is already written for you, and if you can get a video of Building 7 going down to play as you speak it, all the better. And there's so many ways to reach out. I talked last week about that app I found on my phone that you can show videos of Building 7 going down along with other aspects of the controlled demolition evidence. So many ways to have impromptu presentations when you need to. If you're out on the street or if you are in the halls of city council, maybe you aren't speaking that day, but you can talk to people as they're coming out. Maybe you take a vacation down to Washington, D.C. and talk to your Congress members that are coming out. Know your stuff, know your facts, know what you're going to say, and show the video on your phone. Dale is the kind of guy that does these kind of things. He doesn't just keep it within the confines of the internet, commiserating with other people on Facebook about 9/11 and the controlled demolitions of the towers. He goes out and does the kind of activism that people did 30, 40 years ago. We got to bring it back, bring it out of the social networking world and into the real world where it actually matters. And Dale is leading the way. That's why I love having him on the show, other than just being entertaining too. When you speak and tell the truth about the things that you see and the kind of reactions that you get. So people who want to see you, well, there's two ways they can do that. One way, Tony Rook, our friend over in Great Britain, just put out a new movie called Incontrovertible, and it features Dale speaking at a certain point in it. So, Dale, do you want to talk a little bit about your take on your role in Incontrovertible and just how you feel about the movie overall?
I got to be perfectly honest. When it came out, it took me over a month to look at it because it just brought back all the nightmares that not only I lived through, but now it's 20 to 25 families a day are joining this club of having their loved ones commit suicide after the horrors of Iraq, all because these 3 buildings fell down. So Tony called me shortly after I did my first interview with you, and, I really wasn't ready for this. AE had asked me to lead the firefighters as nobody else was stepping up to the plate. And there's really, as far as trying to get, counseling or anything, they're really limited on what they can do, because as soon as you bring up 911, you've lost them. So it was a real issue. I was still kind of pretty well shell-shocked, a lot of anger. And the film brought all that back up, but I love Tony for what he did. And I'll never forget meeting Tony and his whole crew there. And Matt Campbell, who lost his brother, he really connected there. And I'll never forget, we went out for cocktails that night, and he has his story, I have mine. It was heavy, and I had to bring some humor to it. So when the bartender came up and asked us for some drinks, I told him, bring us 2 Manhattans with a couple kamikaze chasers. Matt looked at me like I was crazy, and I just laughed and go, no, we'll just have a beer. So it's you've got to bring some humor to this because it really is tough, and it affects all of our lives, whether you know it or not. I've had some experiences of 13 years after to see the devastation that's happening with all the families, and then the division in America of those that, you know how it was after September 11th. People lost their mind and just wanted to bomb everybody and get back to football. So these individuals that sent our loved ones in the war are now having to deal with the blowback of people like me that have lost loved ones, and it's not pretty. So Tony Rook's film is beautiful on showing that we can't be a Texas lynch mob. We should have looked at the evidence, and we didn't look at it. So how we're going to be judged is going to be difficult, but I fear for our future, and I feel for our history. So I'm just simply trying to correct it, Andy. And Tony Rook, thanks so much for his efforts. He put out an awful lot for that film.
Yeah, that's interesting. I want to get your take on this because when 9/11 happened, everybody was nuts. A lot of people were. I remember, I've said this so many times here on the show, turning on the radio the day after, and there was a DJ who was just rattling off countries that you could either shut up or get in the crosshairs of America in response, saying, "Oh, France, we saved your butt in World War II, so if you don't like what we're doing, shut up." All of this stuff. It was insane. It was like a crazy person had taken over the station. And that was the general attitude. There were young guys. I remember walking into a men's room the day after 9/11. There were two guys standing there by the sink talking about how they feel like going down to the recruiting station, dropping out of college and signing up, for the Army to go avenge 9/11. This was serious stuff that day. And the overall reaction was something like you're replaying history. Like Pearl Harbor happens, the president speaks, and now we're at war, some big war that's going to be unending in this case. And people abandoned their common sense. I saw Building 7 go down, and I thought they had brought it down to control the fire or something, not even thinking rationally. So I want to know if anything like this ever happens again, God forbid, have we had an impact? Have we been able to make the public more vigilant through our efforts doing this show every week, through Tony Rook's efforts of making the Incontrovertible movie, obviously the efforts of AE 9/11 Truth and all that it does? Do you think that we're more vigilant, Dale? I mean, do you think that we're going to see the same thing if anything like this ever happens again? Or do you think that people will call into question the official stories on things, new stuff that comes up?
Well, during the Revolutionary War, only 3 to 4% of the population stepped up. And as you know, I kind of invite myself into to the podium where I get to speak, introduce myself, and I tend to go right into September 11th with a crowd that has no idea what I'm going to talk about. So I can see it in their faces. You get the 4% that absolutely steps up, and, they shake their hands like we did when we came off the podium at City Council. And then there's that other large percentage that just kind of sits there lethargic. And then on the extreme end, you got the 4% that rise up against us. But I really believe through our ability to communicate information, the websites, YouTube, Facebook, that we're passing information so fast that I believe we strived off another attack, because this small group of people that did this are worried about the masses catching on and showing up with pitchforks and torches. So it's give and push. As working for architects and engineers, it's kind of like a corral. It's very rigid because it's just hooked in science. But as firefighters, we can take a broader view of what happened. And working with some of the firefighters out in New York, here we got some trained forensic detectives there. They have had going on 15 years of who did it, why would they do it, and that's when it gets real scary. So we really need to, as volunteers and citizens, we need to look at a broader view and not end up with another Texas lynch mob type thing. We just marched off to Afghanistan and Iraq and all these other countries, blaming them. So we need to be, as citizens, a little more vigilant and not let all the effort that we've gone through at A&E to convict the wrong people. That is one of my biggest fears. So as firefighters, we can dwell on that. And as citizens, we can dwell on that. Architects and engineers has to stick to the science, and that's how they've stayed strong. But we don't want that to be their Achilles heel. So I hope everyone heard this message loud and clear. It's up to us to look at the broader picture. It
is. Well, and we got to, get people to even look at what happened that day. It amazes me how people, so many of them, have still never even heard of Building 7, have not even heard the testimony from the first responders the day of, taken by Graham McQueen, 118 first responders reporting explosions going off. And I'm not saying that they heard bam or boom or whatever. This was a conservative study. They specifically said explosions, or words that would leave you with no doubt that's what they were hearing. And so the powers that be, the establishment, whatever you want to call it, was so quick to put their arms around the first responders that day and use them to exploit the event, exploit the post 9/11 agenda that was built off of the event. But completely overlooks that all too important testimony from that day where, 7 is exploding. You can hear explosions on the video of that firefighter at the payphone. All of these things that would be taken into account if this event wasn't so politically charged, if our establishment figures that are supposed to be overseeing investigations weren't so worried about covering their own butts. So it's so funny how these first responders have been used. And, you doing the outreach with the firefighters, it seems like firefighters would be more interested in getting to the bottom of what happened that day. But a lot of them don't even want to think about this. A lot of them, it's very painful for them to look at that day, because even if they weren't associated with the NYPD, even if they're on the West Coast, it's still scary because, that somebody in their position, having suffered those fates that those firefighters did that day, the ones who died in the towers. Have you found that the response of firefighters has gotten any different over the years?
It's actually gotten worse, I'm afraid. I'm afraid Eric Lawyer, with his just common sense approach, has harvested pretty much all those available. It's real sad when I try to approach firefighters. They can't hear the message. They won't look at the evidence. We've had fire marshals put their hands over the ears and walk away from us. As you know, I told you about a fire chief who really got angry with me and stated that when those planes hit, it was equivalent of a hydrogen bomb going off. Well, this is a trained fire marshal. He's off by 150 million degrees. You can't speak like that as a professional. And people have to warp reality because the reality is just too harsh. So all of a sudden, the periodic table of elements is flexible, and everything just changed on September 11th. It was one of those magical days in the universe. So therefore, everything is just fine. My brother-in-law is an aerospace engineer, and he goes, it's perfectly normal for buildings to behave like that. And when I brought up the free fall acceleration, my sister exploded and said, so what if they did it? How does it affect you? And, I couldn't believe she said that. So I turned around and said, well, maybe because my son's dead. And she goes, oh, you just play the gold star. So this is tragic. This has happened in fire departments. It's happened in families. It's happening everywhere. But we're starting to gel together. People are actually coming together. But like I said, there's been some real tragedies, and I've lived through some more from the blowback from this. It's people just can't live in the reality, so they'll twist reality and warp it and deny evidence. It was said during the trial of the Nazis, they studied them and realized that once the human mind goes emotional, the blood goes to that part of the brain, and the rational thinking is eliminated, just kind of like road rage. So we've got this huge obstacle to cover, and firefighters aren't it. We're going to have to change the environment they live in. And as you know, through some of our guerrilla advertising tactics we're going to use, I think we're going to do that.
That's right, because you got this event coming up in Oregon that you're going to be speaking at. So is Richard Gage, and I want our audience to know more about it. People who can travel to it, I want to give them the opportunity to mark their calendars, put it in their plans. Save the gas money, whatever they got to do to go listen to you speak. So give us all the details of what's going on in a month or so.
Well, as you know, Richard does his tours, and when you approach people with 911 truth, you're really only speaking to those that are emotionally ready to hear the message, and it's not enough people. We need to find a way of waking up the masses. So I started working with Small Business Administration because they can supply you mentors, and I got people in PR. I got marketing experts. I consulted with a psychologist. And they looked at our website and they looked at our stuff and said, this is just too harsh. You're going to have to come in with the children or the dogs of the firefighters that died on the pile or the firefighters themselves in uniform. You're going to have to bring them in emotionally. And that's how I came up with Protect Our Protectors. It's like, okay, if you really believe this is the way it happened, then these buildings are dangerous. They need to be evacuated and red tagged immediately. So to bring in the how that affects them, whether it's city council or just your citizen, that these buildings can fall down, that grabs their attention. So at this event, Marvin's brilliant. He's bringing me in to to bring a story to it, how September 11th wasn't just like a bank robbery or a heist and people got away with it and went and retired down in Panama. No, they're still working around. So we're going to do some guerrilla advertising and bring people in emotionally. So one of the advertisements I'm hoping to use is a picture of my son when he was 5 years old. And it'll be a street level, just something we can download and print out, black and white. It'll say Lost on the top. It'll show my son when he was 5, and it'll say, killed in Iraq or died in Iraq. And give his date of birth, and then give a quick description of, you could have prevented this by knowing 3 towers fell on September 11th. So there'll be a father that lost his son and Richard Gage speaking. So we'll bring him in emotionally of hey, we're losing these soldiers. We need to protect them. And by the way, here's the only real professional we have to speak about the World Trade Center towers. So we're using tactics like that, and that's how I was able to join this association working with City Council. And I'm actually now approaching each City Council member one step at a time. And where I learned a lot of these skills was Toastmasters. I'm able to go before a group and give a 5 to 7 minute speech over and over, and I'm seeing their emotions. I'm seeing how they react. I get written results back. So this latest club that I'm in, I'm getting some incredible feedback, but the vice president has become extremely upset with me and doesn't want me to talk about September 11th. So fine, as a firefighter, I got plenty more to talk about. We got the Boston bombing, and then I decided that to write a speech about a man I met heading to Atlanta to the AI convention last year, and he explained September 11th on a Christian's point of view, a true Christian. And that is the 10 Commandments. One of them is, thou shalt not kill. Another one is, watch for false prophets. And he stated that there is a highway to hell and only a stairway to heaven, and that is because the majority of people are lazy, they're rather weak, and they've just simply relied on television for all their information. In other words, they went to war over what they saw on television. Now, my son went to a war that was obviously fraud, but that's controversial. But what is not controversial is after 2 years of combat, he and who knows how many thousands, if not tens of thousands of soldiers were given untreated water directly out of the Euphrates River. Now, as a firefighter and a trained and experienced commercial saturation diver, I know how to bring fresh air, pure water, pure food to a fire line or to an oil rig or to a boat. There's no excuse for what they did to our soldiers, just like the masks that were allowed all the particles to come in and give them cancer. We've lost over 1,000 firefighters now due to those masks. So after being poisoned, here we have George Bush at the press correspondence dinner. He just didn't come up with this. This was written to his speech of making fun of our soldiers looking for those weapons of mass destruction under the podium, and the whole crowd laughed. And this man on the train told me, these people are going to hell. God's kingdom is great. We have no place for him. And there's these hundreds of millions of so-called Christians are going to be on the highway to hell. I was just staggered when this man told me this. So I decided to write this into my speech and present it to Toastmasters. I'm going to record it, and we're going to call out Toastmasters International to help us spread this message. This is a moral issue. How is God going to judge you when we went to war in Iraq and we treated God's children like we did? So that should be a show in itself, Andy, when this finally plays out. As you did with C-SPAN, this is an international organization. I've got incredibly strong support, and I'm making these people uncomfortable. Well, I'm very, very sorry, but look what you did to Iraq and our soldiers. So it's getting heavy, Andy, and I don't see any way of it lightening up. It's for every action, there's a reaction. We destroyed Iraq, and now the blowback's coming, and I can feel it. I'm living it. So we can only hope for the best. But, my dad lived through the Battle of the Hurricane Forest, where we lost 38,000 men in battle. And when it was all over, the The GIs had some serious questions about that battle. They said it didn't have to happen, and it was finally official policy that they stated it was all for American pride. So it's going to be a very powerful speech when I go into Toastmasters, and there's so many of these organizations where we can go in and speak, and like I said, when you start out emotionally, bringing in the firefighter safety or our soldiers, it makes it much easier.
Yeah, that's something that I've never brought up on the show, and you talked to me a lot about that, the Toastmasters, and how that can be utilized, first of all, to make you a better speaker. I've never gone to a Toastmasters meeting. I could probably benefit from that, but also just as a captive audience to some extent, where you can actually go in and talk about 9/11, Building 7, and the people have to sit there and listen to you because it's part of the class. So that is a great presentation opportunity for people to take advantage of. And so I'm glad you brought that up here, and I'm glad that you are doing what you're doing with the Toastmasters, all that you just described. You also talked about George Bush and that infamous, I think it was the press conference or the press correspondence dinner, if that's what it's called, where he was showing pictures of himself looking around the Oval Office. And he said, those weapons of mass destruction have got to be somewhere. And that entire room of evening gowns and tuxedos, people were wearing those, just laughed like it was something funny. And what amazes me is how out of touch is that entire culture, that there wasn't somebody who would realize how politically tone deaf that would be. Even just looking out for the president and how he'd be perceived by the rank and file out there, the people whose sons and daughters went to go fight in that war. Just absolutely atrocious. I mean, forgetting about the fact that 9/11 buildings were brought down in a controlled demolition, and we've never had an acknowledgement of that from the government. And even though we went into Afghanistan directly after 9/11, and then Iraq kind of came afterwards, and they used the weapons of mass destruction argument, people still had it in their head, a lot of them, that Saddam Hussein had something to do with 9/11. That was still coming off of the post-9/11 feeling of wanting to get revenge on the entire world, that was taken advantage of, that feeling. So I have no problem bringing that up in relation to 9/11 and the fact that the buildings were brought down in a controlled demolition, and just how atrocious that was. That was part of my own awakening too. Like one little piece of it was seeing that display, and just the champagne bottles and people laughing like it's something funny. And just the fact that nobody caught that. Nobody in the president's staff said, Mr. President, I don't think that's going to play well with the people at home if they get a hold of this video. Just shows how out of touch they are.
Yeah, that really puts fear in me, because we're such a great nation. We've done so much, and here to decay to that point, and then that he wasn't impeached for that, or just simply reprimanded or brought it up or even questioned. And where were the Democrats? I mean, my God, the suffering that you go through in warfare is just atrocious. My dad lived through World War II. My mom went through the Berlin bombing. And what my son did in Iraq is just beyond belief. I mean, I have this unbelievable picture of this poor mouse that these soldiers took, and they thumbtacked him to the wall as they went out on their raid. And I discovered that they were torturing animals so they could desensitize themselves before they had to go out into the communities where they were stationed and basically do their night raids and eliminate people of age. My son blew a guy's head off right in front of his mother in the living room. It was like, oops, wrong house. So, have a nice day. And this went on day after day after day. So for them to do that, I just can't even imagine when historians put this together. It's going to be unbelievable. The documentation's there. Growing up, I was very interested in World War II, and we all had our laughs at the Nazis on how crazy they became at the end and with some of their statements. But this is beyond anything I've seen, to laugh at our own soldiers. That's why this man said, there is a highway to hell and only a stairway to heaven. Think about that. All those people laughing. Do you really think God's going to allow him in his kingdom? Not a chance. I'm sure my son will be up there riding shotgun to make sure they don't sneak in the back door.
Now, for anybody that's new to this show or maybe new to this issue or didn't see Incontrovertible, can you remind everybody of Noah, what happened there, and just essentially bring them up to speed so they understand the reference?
Yeah, Noah joined the military apparently 2 days after September 11th, and he did his faithful duty, and they marched him off into Iraq. He was there for the invasion of Baghdad. He lived through a year of that combat. When he came back, he was major league PTSD, and that's when the suicides had already started. They had already started in Iraq after a major incident in Baghdad, which I cover on Incontrovertible. It was a ferocious story to hear, and it was the real deal. These aren't make-up stories. So we dealt with him for a year. I had it where he could have got out of the military with just one signature, but apparently once these kids are gone, their only hope is to go back into combat and die, or just, they claim it's the hero status, but they no longer belong here, and they know it. The combat field's the only place left for them. So he went back for a second tour, and that's where he killed a doctor at a checkpoint and took this unbelievable picture of the man after he died. You could see the bullet hole right through his neck. He was ordered to shoot that man. Apparently he was working for us. There was a bombing. His family was bombed by our bombs. He was upset, obviously, and pulled up to one of our checkpoints, was just a shooting gallery for our soldiers. He was upset and looked out of place, so the sergeant just ordered my son to shoot him. So that and just all the other stuff. He ran over a little kid in his Hummer and told everybody it was a dog. They hit an IED. His best friend was just blown all over the IED, all over the inside of the Bradley they were in. My son suffered traumatic brain injury in that explosion, but even then he had to gather up what was left of this guy's body and put in a bag and clean up the thing and go back on patrol. So he came back to America, and he was pissed at all of us. We were the adults that sent these children into war. He wouldn't talk to me because I didn't fight hard enough to stop the war. He didn't want to talk to his mom because she was pro-war. It was just a nightmare. He lived a little over a year and a half afterward, wrote an incredible 12 poems of war, which Marvin will be displaying in Oregon. And one night he went out and shot himself. So, it was not unexpected. It was, I put myself in his shoes and realized that's the only option he had. It was just a matter of waiting. There was nothing we could do. And 22 families are joining that club every day. So shame on Bush, the Republicans, for making fun of our soldiers, and shame on the Democrats for allowing them to get away with it.
And I want to say this. You talk about 22 families. Would you say every day or every month?
Every single day, 22 soldiers commit suicide, and I heard it's up to 25 now.
I want to put out this plea, and maybe I'm not the best motivational speaker, but if you are having these issues, you need to get help. Even if you're not contemplating suicide, if you're suffering the PTSD and you're going through the rage, or you got anger issues, even if you're not a soldier, even if you're, got issues like this, don't take that last step. Get help. There's no shame in doing that. There is no weakness in doing whatever you can to save yourself. Because once you take that final step, it's not as hard on you as it is on the people that know you. Because they got to live with that afterwards. And there's just no reason for that. If you think you need help, go out and get in. There's so many avenues to try to do that here in the United States. If you can write to the show if you need help, and we'll try to get you hooked up or figure out some way to help. I just don't want to see any more people take that last step or commit suicide. It's just such a terrible thing what it does to the people that you leave behind. You've worked with soldiers with PTSD too afterwards. Anything that you want to add to that? Anything that you've observed or you want people to take away from your experience with those people?
Yeah, I met one guy. This was a remarkable story. I just spotted him, and he was cashing out. He could say 2 sentences, and that was it. He was done for the evening. And I heard that he just got back from Iraq. So I introduced myself, talked, and he just shut down immediately. he saw me later and just said, look, I didn't kill anybody. I was raped over there by my sergeant. And it was just kind of took me by surprise. The guy was like 6'2". He was a big guy. And luckily he really didn't see combat. I don't know what his position was, but it was the rape that did it. And it was obvious he was cashing out. And I suggested that he go into therapy. And I myself went through it and used EMDR. And lo and behold, about a year later, I get a phone call from this guy, and I couldn't recognize him. He was talking a mile a minute, told me how excited he was over reading my letter to him of getting help. He went in, and it was just a remarkable turnaround, and he's fine. But unfortunately, for so many of these kids coming back from Iraq, the guilt of knowing that they were used for this smash and grab in Iraq is horrendous. But for so many of them, with the brain injuries, the guilt, and then like my son and these others that were given untreated water at Euphrates River. I mean, the diseases that were in that river, the contaminants, the sewage, the pollution, it just wrecked their bodies. And they basically don't have a choice but suicide. And unfortunately, Andy, most of these kids engage in suicidal driving. My son did until he totaled his car, so that is endangering all of us. It just seems to be the preferred method. Get nice and drunk and just crash your car. But some of these kids are living through that, and they end up in an old beat-up car, and then eventually, like my son, commit suicide. So, you know, who said it? The most unpatriotic thing you can do is send our soldiers into war without scrutinizing the evidence, and that's what we did. So history's going to judge us hard, but the final judgment will be God. And like this man said, he has no room for people that engage in this type of behavior. So these kids coming back, get help if you can, but, you know, you've got my love and sympathy if you were in my son's position. I wish they would get help, but boy, like my son, there was no saving him. He was gone.
And I'm going to tell you what, folks, I mean, if you're out there and you're in the situation that Noah was in, I can understand why you would be angry. I can understand why you'd want to get back at someone, but do it smart, all right? And the smart way to do it is to help out with the 9/11 truth. Or, you know, if you want to be anti-war or whatever, whichever avenue, but if you do it in this kind of a way, if you become active, if you go out and speak about what you did out there to people, you hone it. You know, I mean, you're going to be angry. You're never going to get rid of anger. It's just always there. But you can use it wisely, and you can use it to go talk about Building 7, to go tell people about the free fall of the building or the molten steel at the site. Right? Or you can talk about the other aspects. You can talk about the fact that people were lied to in the war. Any way that you can educate others. And I saw this thing one time about comic books and going into the psychology of it. And the difference between villains and heroes is that they both have something terrible happen to them, but how you choose to respond to it distinguishes you. If you decide that, oh, this happened to me and it should happen to other people, that makes you a villain. But if you decide that this happened to me, and I'm going to stop this from ever happening to someone again, then you're a hero. And that's what you need to be out there, all right? Let you be the last person that this happened to, and use your voice instead of being destructive.
You know, Andy, that's great. That's if you remember, I brought in a man from the Small Business Administration that specialized in PR, and he told us that we needed an Al Gore to represent us. Well, we're not going to get an Al Gore, but, you know, one of these soldiers could be it. With their experience, young and traumatized like that, they could be the perfect spokesman that, you know, you sent me to Iraq when I was 18 or, you know, whatever, and tell his story, then all because these buildings fell down. And, you know, it's pretty much the mainstream media versus this incredible group of architects and engineers that actually can put together a comprehensive story of all the evidence instead of these wild theories that men with box cutters could take over our aircraft. Huge questions. Doesn't matter where you look. It's like, okay, we haven't had a hijacking since the 70s. How did they snatch 4 airplanes, especially with a flight termination switch system that can control those aircraft once they've been hijacked? They just simply turn a switch and fly the plane back, and hijacker can just sit there and do nothing with the plane. So we have all these questions, and a soldier coming back from Iraq or Afghanistan could be our Al Gore. So if you're out there, please join us. We need all the help we can get.
Right, and folks, I mean, if you're worried about speaking or anything like this, you get better with practice, and just being who you are is going to get attention, no doubt. And are you saying we have questions? You know, an early idea I floated for the Beyond Misinformation book, which was terrible and shot down, but I thought it was kind of cute and clever, was we have questions, science has answers. And actually, that wasn't even my idea. That was my mom's idea. Yeah, my mom gives me ideas secretly sometimes. Yeah, we should use that for something. I don't know what. We have questions, science has answers. We got to keep that in the drawer here and pull that out for some campaign or something someday.
Yeah, timing's everything with that. That's a beauty.
So the event in Oregon, when is it? Where is it?
I believe April 2nd. Lincoln Hall at the Portland University, downtown Portland, Oregon. So I hope to get up there a little early and pass out leaflets, do some guerrilla advertising. A little too early for a campaign I have of we're contacting garden clubs and asking them to donate flowers for firefighter memorials to represent the firefighters that died on September 11th. And I'm getting incredible results. I go before these garden clubs and present myself and why I need flowers, and we need gardeners to put up memorials for us because we can't travel all over the United States, and I'm getting incredible results. So hopefully we'll get a few up there, but it's a great way to advertise, and we want to bring as many people into this engagement as we can to start gelling the West Coast. Everything starts on the West Coast and the East Coast and moves inland. So we got Marvin Sanos up there doing incredible work. He'll be doing a memorial for my son at the Capitol, I believe, and he'll be reading some of my son's poems. These are extremely potent. So we're just going to keep making ourselves present. And with these guerrilla advertising that I'm coming up with, hopefully we'll have some for AE where our followers, our helpers and volunteers can just simply print up a dozen or 100 every day and start marking our territory. You could just post them here, post them there, everywhere, at work, in the bathroom stalls, at the bus stop. Simple little things to drive people into our websites. So that's what we're hoping to do up there, and turn this around instead of preaching to the choir, that we can start bringing in anybody and everybody that cares about their country.
Right, and you talk about guerrilla advertising a lot. You were telling me an example of some movie company or somebody, I don't remember like who it was, but they made a movie and they put a DVD in a block of ice and left it in front of a movie theater. Didn't you tell me that story? Yeah,
and they charge big dollars for this to come up with the idea and then to present it. For instance, these wild postings that I'm talking about, just plastering all over the place, they charge $1,500 to come up with the idea and design one, and I've got us at least a dozen, and then they're $10 each to put up. Well, our volunteers could print these things out with black ink and almost no cost, and a piece of tape or some flour paste. And if people keep seeing this over and over and over, like one I'm coming up with for AE shows the Twin Towers, number 1 and number 2, and next to it is building number 7. Under it, I have 1 plus 1 equals 3. So it's a contradiction that catches people's eye, and it's real simple. I just under it have YouTube WTC 7. So as people are hustling down the street or on their bus or on their plane or wherever, or in a coffee shop, they got their iPhone. They're 2 clicks away from the rabbit hole. So you bring them in with something intriguing. We grab them with a website like Protect Our Protectors. Gee, these firefighters are in trouble. We're in trouble. You know, look what they did with the mask. Look what they did with the water in Iraq. And then there's a link to AE. So it's kind of like if we have to move a whole bunch of people in, say the Old West from, Philadelphia to California, we're going to lose the majority of those people. It's a rough environment. But what if we built some bridges and some ferries and all this? It might not seem like it's part of our mission to be building ferries and going up to Montana to chop down lumber to build our bridges, but if we do that, we could get everybody across the plains and across the Grand Canyon relatively easily. So that's what I'm doing. Instead of just, hey, it was a controlled demolition and we're in trouble, you've got to bring them in emotionally. And I'm having virtually nonstop resistance, and the actual resistance I get is almost comical if it wasn't so tragic. But this is what I was told to do: bring them in emotionally, and then almost let them run into the obvious conclusion. We'll harvest a lot more people. So we're really Oregon's going to be an advertisement for these type of postings, and see if we get more than the usual, we know we got something going here. I've done this before by using women and children in warfare for bringing people into theaters, so we shall see. But I'm really looking forward to this engagement.
Well, when I hear about such things, I think back to an old-timey director named William Castle, and I go through these periods where I get obsessed with like a certain director or a writer or something, and I'll just look at all of the movies that they made, read all of the books that they've written in like a short time. But this guy made movies where he would come up with some publicity stunt to help advertise it. Like one of them, he had subliminals in it, and they give this big warning of how there's subliminals in this movie. So, be warned. It might frighten you even more. And the subliminals, when you actually pause the video, it's just like a little cartoon devil or a little ghost saying boo or something like that. There was one movie, I can't remember which one, where they had Lloyd's of London. Supposedly, they had Lloyd's of London insure the movie in case anybody died of fright during it. And it's just little publicity stunts like this that made this guy unique and made him a pioneer in the movie field. And so, we need ideas like this for the scientific evidence of the controlled demolitions of the buildings on 9/11. 9/11 truth, the science truth. Your ideas are great. Great slogan there. 1 + 1 = 3. Most people don't know about the third tower that fell, Building 7. Great ideas like this that are going to catch people's attention. And so this gets into art. I mean, if you are an artist, a performance artist, put on a little play in Central Park about it. Do some clever thing that's going to get people's attention. We need that kind of help, and it's a lot of fun, too, when you do these kinds of things. Make sure it's legal and doesn't offend people. Make sure it just gets their attention and they find it interesting. So I love how your brain thinks, because you're right along with that. You're all about doing whatever you can to hook people into the issue and keep their attention and make them want to do something about it.
Yeah, I have to admit, Richard Gage and Eric Laurier had such a simple and easy message. It was like a no-brainer. And so I would naively thought, I can just take this and Tulu into a firehouse. Well, I about got scorched, live doing that. And I couldn't believe how they would just refuse to look at the evidence, refuse to hear it. So I decided I had to find another way to do this. I remember when how I got involved with AE, and that's when you guys came up with the Rethink campaign and you did the billboard in front of the New York Times. I had already by that time decided that, as a commercial diver, we worked off the west coast of California, and unfortunately we swam right in the feed line of great white sharks. So for, the majority of my adult life, I did the bump and grind with these critters, and it was scary. A lot of us got bit, and I had a personal friend that actually got bit in half. And his crew members, pulled him up and watched him die. And after that incident, we found by changing our behaviors that we could live with these things pretty well. Instead of just being reckless, we learned how to change our behaviors, and by God, we haven't been bit since. And that's what I did. I just went into, okay, we got these people that'll do all these horrible things, I'll just continue my life living outside of the cities. But when you guys did the billboard, I had to get involved. That just really got to me. Like, they got nerve to do that, the nerve to go before the New York Times and do that. And I felt like an old hound dog that was being left behind because, could no longer hunt. So I called you guys up, and here I am.
Yep, and that is something that needs to be done all over the world. I mean, the fact that we have to raise so much money to make things like that happen, and it only happens like for a short time during one particular year. We need more people to help out and do things like if you don't have time to volunteer and do all the great stuff that Dale is doing and our other volunteers are doing, You can become a member at AE 9/11 Truth and help us in our efforts to have more things like the cool billboard or the billboard that was outside of the New York Times after Sanger was confronted on C-SPAN's Washington Journal one morning near Christmas about Building 7 by one of the survivors of the events, the 9/11 events, sons confronted him about Building 7. Actually, I think the billboard was up before Sanger was confronted, but it was calling out the New York Times for their shoddy coverage of the story of the issue. Their one-sided coverage, essentially doing the same thing that the rest of the corporate media is doing, and labeling physics and common sense as a conspiracy theory. So that's something that we can't tolerate. What do you think about Congress? I'm going to shift really quick to congressional outreach because I haven't really talked to you about this. As we get further and further away from the event, what do you think are going to be some of the techniques or some of the things that 9/11 Truth in general is going to have to do to get Congress to pay attention to this and take some steps towards having a new investigation?
Our congressmen, unfortunately, the majority of them are making so much money, they're more concerned about their personal wealth. John McCain didn't know how many houses he owned. He didn't know how many buildings fell on September 11th. And Hillary Clinton left the White House basically broke, and look at her now. Apparently she owns 6 big mansions by giving or selling contracts to Iraq to corporations where Bill Clinton goes in and gives a speech for $600,000, and I guess they're making off quite well on the war agenda. So I don't have much hope for Congress. They seem to put other interests first before America. I think it's going to be up to us on a street level to force them to change, whether we vote them out or just simply hold their feet to the fire like you did on C-SPAN. Here one individual, the small group of volunteers, caused these people havoc. For instance, when you and me walked into city council, now that I see how city council works, believe me, we might have left and thinking we didn't do anything, but you can't go throwing rocks in a building like that and not conk a couple people on the head. I can assure you that there was some heated discussions then and ongoing now. Some of those city council members heard us loud and clear and looked over at their colleagues that were staring at dust going by and just pretending that we weren't there. You remember the detective? He got more exercise squirming in his seat as you did your presentation than he's had exercise in 10 years. So we're going to have to change it at a street level, Andy. These postings that I'm doing, getting everybody on the same sheet that, on the same page as us, that, these wars and poverty, it's all connected. So I don't have much hope for Congress, if you really put it that way. I know you got some great ones, Cynthia McKinney, but she's no longer in. The majority of them they've been bought off, I'm afraid.
Well, and the only hope that I have is that it's somewhere right now there's like a 20-year-old who is going to be a congressman someday. I mean, that's just definitely, a given, because someone's going to have to assume that role. And we may be able to reach that person. And, you don't even know who you're reaching when you do the simple things every day. I was woken up because somebody intentionally mislabeled a 9/11 video on a cartooning website. And I saw that and got a little confused by why it was there, but then started looking into the info. And now, here I am doing this show, working with AE every single day, and getting the word out. So, you could wake up that young person who may be in Harvard or Yale right now, and they'll go on and run for Congress and keep it in the back of their mind that, governments tend to lie about things like 9/11 and scientific evidence, and they'll be more vigilant and less willing to go along with the post-9/11 agenda. You can hope so. And we have the tools available to you. We have an email sign-up sheet. If you don't have time to engage people completely about the controlled demolition evidence to go into a full presentation because you're on the street, you can sign them up for emails from AE, and that way they can learn more about us, find out our activities, find out about things like the presentation in Oregon that's going to be going on in a month, and do your part that way. You can download the app that I found and talked about last week on the show with all of the 9/11 evidence on it. and essentially do the same stuff that the Save the Whales people are doing. The same stuff that the Cancer Foundation people are doing. These simple things that add up to a lot when a lot of people do them. You can do it. Just if you're an activist already, just add 9/11 to the activities that you do. Factor that into your schedule. So many simple things that can be done and just pile up and make a huge difference. It's crazy that we don't have more pressure on Congress to do something, because that's all Congress reacts to, is when you put pressure on them and confront them. Nobody does anything they'd rather not do unless they feel some kind of pressure in some way. Dale, any comments on what I just said or thoughts before we end the show tonight?
Yeah, I've referred to this war as the latte war, because it seems like the majority of the battle I do is in front of my computer with a latte, and I think about my dad fighting for 4 months in the hurricane forest in December, losing 38,000 men, and what my son did in Iraq, and all the other wars. I think about the French resistance, and here we get to sit in front of a computer and do most of our work. And how does the French resistance feel about how lethargic we are as a nation? Here we've obviously had this incredible crime, and the majority of so many people have spent all their time defending that, don't you know, jet fuel melts steel. So I just love to have one of those incredible French resistance fighters to give his opinion on what he feels about America. And I know that we come down hard on France for being soft on war and stuff, but it's a two-way street. We haven't heard these guys' thoughts about how lethargic we are and how few of us there are that are dealing with this. So those are my thoughts.
Right, and the thing is that you don't need the majority. All you need is a dedicated minority. The rest of the people will go along with whoever wins in the end. I can totally see, there's certain people I've met and know who I can totally see, if it gets acknowledged that Building 7 was a controlled demolition, will say, well, what do you know about that? I always suspected that, even if they didn't. It'll suddenly become the trendy thing. I think there's a T-shirt or somebody who quoted who is saying, I was a truther before it was cool. And I know I can say that. So can you, Dale, because when you came into it, was a time when there was still a lot of resistance to it. And we're in a time of resistance now still. We still got our work cut out for us. But I like to think that more people are waking up and that the climate is getting a lot cooler. For those out there speaking the truth about this event. Any last words before we end the show?
Yeah, it's definitely a lot easier to do it now. People have softened up to more of a conversation. It's definitely not as rabid as the years afterward. I think after the failures in Iraq, people took a deep breath and started evaluating and went, oops, maybe something's wrong here. So when they hear us coming, we definitely have a lot more respect. I know when I stepped off the podium at City Council in Walnut Creek, one of the attorneys there jumped up and shook my hand and thanked me and took one of our brochures. So it's a changing.
That's right, and we're all part of that change. Dale Pierce, I want to thank you so much for coming back on 9/11 Free Fall, and good luck in Oregon.
Thank you, Andy.
This program's on every Thursday night on No Lies Radio at 10 o'clock Eastern, 7 o'clock Pacific. You can also download MP3s of this show from the Internet Archive by going to 911freefall.com. This is Andy Steele saying have a great week and good luck.